From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. This March, if you ask for a Republican ballot in the primary election, you will see three options under Polk County Sheriff. If you ask for a Democratic ballot, there will be no such options. But that doesn't necessarily mean that whoever wins the Republican primary will automatically become the next sheriff. If former police officer and Polk County native Keenan Nesbitt does what it takes to convince somewhere north of 600 registered voters to sign his petition, his name will be added to the ballot as an independent candidate in the November general election. I'm not going to use this platform to endorse anyone in the race for sheriff, or any other candidate in any of the other races for that matter. But because few things are as depressing in an election as a lack of choice, I wanted to make sure that any unaffiliated candidate who is obviously taking this election seriously gets every chance to get his or her message out, as do the partisan candidates. Plus, I'm still trying to get my head around the idea of the chief law enforcement officer in the county running for that office under a partisan banner, particularly during a time when the people of this country are so polarized around politics. I'm willing to concede that electing a sheriff might be wiser than letting a partisan board of commissioners appoint one, but if I could make the rules, I'd try to find a way to keep politics out of policing. My guest agrees, to an extent at least. Keenan Nesbitt has worked for 3 different police departments in our region. When asked to describe his relevant qualities, he came up with young, aspirational, and fearless. His vision of a sheriff's department is one that fosters a community of love, respect, and trust. In this episode, which was recorded just as the snow was melting on Groundhog Day, we talk about why he thinks Polk County's current sheriff isn't doing enough to bring about that vision, why he's decided to do the heavy lifting of getting on the ballot as an independent, and what can be done to restore the trust that the public once had in its law enforcement officers. Keenan Nesbitt, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
All right. There's so much to talk about because anytime there's an independent candidate, there's a whole nother range of questions beyond a normal partisan candidate. But before we get into that, tell me about yourself, where you come from, and how you got to the point where you wanted to be sheriff.
Well, I'm gonna give you the short version of that. I'm a native, who loves this county. I love my home, love where I come up, where I'm born and raised. I started law enforcement in 2018, and I never wanted to be in law enforcement. I never really cared about being in law enforcement, just from what I saw growing up, how law enforcement worked. So there was a young man that was working at the PD in Tryon at the time that kind of convinced me to get into the fight. She told me I couldn't change it from the outside, I had to change it from the inside. So that's what lit the fire in me to join law enforcement in 2017. But man, I'm just a good old Polk County boy, love my county, contribute to my county. I've done good things. I've represented my county in amateur boxing. I have fought in the Golden Glove twice. I represented Tryon and Polk County twice in the USA Amateur Boxing Golden Glove tournament in Charlotte. I'm a business owner, so I run my own business currently. And I just want to give back. I just want to give back to my county. I'm trying to, also follow the footsteps of my deeply rooted family. My grandfather, he was at the PD, Tryon PD, long time ago. He did roughly 40 years for the town of Tryon till he retired. So I didn't know that until probably shortly after I got in law enforcement. I thought I was the first in my family, but I wasn't. Somebody told me, like, no, here's a picture of your grandfather. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And so I'm just trying to, pave the way, make a difference.
What business do you run now?
So I run a pressure washing business, a pressure washing and staining business.
Okay, and so how long were you in law enforcement?
So I got in 2017. Well, I went through basic in 2017, came out, and then I graduated in December of 17, and then got in at Hendersonville June of 2018. And so I was at roughly 8 years. So, and so it's been a good time. I learned a lot in Hendersonville. And then I went over to Buncombe in 2020, and that's when, the understanding of how a sheriff office works really started coming to me, being able to, you know, see it from close up and personal, and then especially in the role that I played, which is, community resource officer, which, deal a lot with admin and kind of being that liaison between the community and the sheriff office. And so that's when I really started, getting that grasp of like, hey, I think I can do this.
So you've worked in 3 different counties
Yes, I worked in 2 different
as a
counties.
police officer.
Yeah, I worked in 2 different counties. Started in Hendersonville, the PD, and then went over to Buncombe in 2020. So,
Okay. So let's turn to the fundamental question. Why do you think Polk County needs a new sheriff?
well, I like to think of it this way. I don't personally think. If people think. So it's not a Keenan, personally think that we need a new sheriff. It's the county. I have had a few people reach out to me, well, more than a few, from the last election, and I think 2022, asking me to put my name in a hat. And I was honest with them. I just told them at that time that I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared for that mentally. I just didn't have it at that point. But when I started paying attention more, because I worked away, so when I started paying attention more to what people were complaining about, what I saw the biggest thing was we have a sheriff office that's not connected to the community. We have a sheriff that's not accessible. If people complain about, they call them and they don't ever get a call back, and then you hear some people say, well, anytime I call him, he give me everything I want. So to me, it lets me know right then that it's not more of he's not accessible. He's just choosing to deal with who he wants to deal with. And as a sheriff, I just believe that you are everybody's sheriff. You're not just a selected group of people sheriff. You're everybody. So if somebody come calling you, I don't care if it's the most aggravating thing, you open your ears and you listen. If they want to come up to your office, you ain't got nothing going on, you invite them in and sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and talk to them.
Do you see specific communities that are being paid attention to and others that aren't?
I'm not going to say, in that sense of
Sorry,
where,
or is it just specific individuals? It's kind of like
I think it's more specific individuals, and I don't want to seem like I'm taking jabs at a person, with them not being here to defend themselves, because that's not the type of man I am. But just from what I've been told, right? I will elaborate on what I've been told. Yes and no. I do see it being a specific group of folks. Not saying white or black. It's just that specific group, whether it's, Republicans or whether it's Democrats or whether it's, you know, this group to go to this church and, or this group that he hanged out with, or, you know, in that sense, that's what I've kind of been told. Have I ever reached out to him? No, personally, I have not ever reached out to him. I had no need to have reached out to him to see if I could get that, you know, one-on-one time with him, or if he would just blow me off and not, return my call or whatever. So, just hearing people complain about, that, and then, some of the other things that people complain about, they felt like the trust wasn't there, far as at the sheriff office as a whole, not any individual there, but just the sheriff office as a whole, just the trust. Everybody, we don't even know none of the officers, so apparently they're not getting out, making themselves known, like they're like, they ride through our communities and they just have their windows up. They never get out and stop, speak. And for me, as working at a sheriff office at Buncombe in that size and that capacity of Buncombe is I was one guy as a community resource officer in Buncombe for 660 something square miles. And I got out. I rode through communities. I got out and spoke to people if I seen them out. If it's a nice day and I seen an older couple sitting on the porch, I pull over and I get out and I just introduce myself and I say, hey, no problem. I'm just coming. I see you sitting down. I'm just coming to sit down and chat with you. And I let them know who I was. And that's the way I ran that position. And it worked out in the favor for, Sheriff Miller. He got a lot of good complaints about how, they love the fact that he had a person out there that's being more serving to the community instead of policing the community. You know, we have to have deputies and people out enforcing the law, but you also can't forget that it's serving. You got to serve.
Well, the phrase is serve and protect.
Correct. Correct. Not protect and serve. Serve and protect. In that exact order. And so, and that's what, you know, we're not getting here in the sheriff office. And so it's that need a change, right? Because the people need to know that the people that they can call on, they can also trust them. They need to know who they calling on. So you have to change your vision on the way you look at law enforcement and say, I'm not here to police people, I'm here to serve people. If I'm here to serve people, I will push my deputies to get out and to introduce themselves more. Whatever zone you work in, people should be able to know you by your first name. They shouldn't be calling you deputy, for example, me, Deputy Nesbitt. No, they should be able to say, hey, Keenan, how you doing today? That is that community engagement. That's that community building there, because now you let them become a little personal to you by giving them your first name. I never allowed people to call me Deputy Nesbitt. It just, I don't like that. That's my title. If I met somebody, they say, who Deputy Nesbitt? No, I'm Keenan. That's a deputy at Buncombe County Sheriff's Office.
You're kind of
vice versa.
evoking an Andy Griffith scenario where the sheriff is part of the community. He's not above and beyond it.
The people put you there. And that's what I think a lot of sheriffs, you know, not talking about our particular sheriff, but I think a lot of sheriff and a lot of leadership across, you know, the county and in the country that we're dealing with right now is people forget when they get in these positions that the people put you there. You owe the people that much to be able to say, hey, when you call me, I'm gonna answer.
Okay, we're going to get back to all the implications of that understanding later, but let's move on to this very interesting for me question of why you're choosing to run as an independent, because you have to get a lot of signatures to get on the ballot for this November, and I think you have to do it by March, right?
Yes.
How many signatures do you need?
So the total exact number, if I'm not mistaken, I think is 637 registered voters, residents of Polk County. And that's the mountain.
Okay,
that is a hurdle.
So why choose to do that? In other words, why not run as a Democrat? 10 years ago, we had a very popular Democrat as our sheriff, right? Hill.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Now everything's been very Republican since then, but why not choose to run through the party system? The only other three candidates on the ballot, there are three candidates for the Republican nomination in the primary, but there are no Democrats running in the primary. So why do you choose to run as an independent?
I feel our local government is too politically influenced, especially in our law enforcement, and that is not a good thing. The question you ask yourself, especially right now with what we're seeing in our country, if you have a Republican sheriff or you got a Democratic sheriff, how does the vice versa the parties feel about that situation? Do you feel that you know, that sheriff has your best interest if you're on the opposite party? The party's values are total opposite. You know, we don't have, it's not, to me, I don't think we have a lot of conservative mindsets that are in political power right now. So if you are a normal person like you and I, those values that we share from what we see and what we hear, we're like, well, that don't align with ours, whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican and vice versa. So how do you feel that, you know, you have your best interest? So for me, when I was thinking about this thing and when it brought to my attention to run and people were asking me, I knew, I was like, well, my role that I played and what my career and my law enforcement experience is built on is serving everyone, from the rich to the poor, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. I didn't care. Republican, Democrat, liberal, I didn't care. You called me, I answered. I came and solved the problem. I came and did what we needed to do. I sat down and talked to you just like I'll talk to anybody else. So I knew then that if I went into this thing, in order to build that real trust and to let people know that, hey, I'm here to serve everyone, you need to do it from a position where you are for everyone and you're not picking a party. What I learned about politics in my years to work at the sheriff office, you pick a party and they back you. Well, it's proven that that party it wants something. They kick a lot of money. I mean, that's just common sense. Anybody that kicks a lot of money behind anybody, whether it's investing in your business or whatever, they're gonna want something in return later on. What does that want? You don't know until they ask. And so I felt that, with me really wanting to serve the people and get away from that political influence, I like, no, law enforcement don't need that. Law enforcement need to where people know that people in this uniform wearing this badge, we here to serve you no matter what you are, no matter your belief, across the board.
So I've asked this same question to folks, say, running for school board or for county commissioner. Who will say all kinds of things similar to what you said about how we should not be serving only one side. And they don't like the polarization in this country and in this county.
Yeah.
They don't like the partisan politics that have been imposed upon us, because we didn't used to have partisan school board members until last time, right? But in the end, they say, but it's so hard to run as an independent. You just got to pick a party that's closest, the party that you disagree with the least, and run with them. But you've decided no. Is that in part because the sheriff, police officers really should not be political? It crosses a line. Whereas county commissioner, school board, you can see, well, maybe they could fit within the partisan structure, but you really don't like the idea of any partisan allegiance as a sheriff or as a police officer in general?
No, I do not. I do not like that. Like I said, the way to break it down and make it simple to a lot of people that don't really get, the whole graphs of, running as an unaffiliated or independent, sheriff is me personally. I'm fiscally conservative. I'm social liberal. I care about what we're doing with our tax dollars, how we're taking care of our community and serving our people as a whole. What you do in your personal time, that's you. I'm not picking whether, or not you want to do this, you want to do that. That's none of my business. We all as individuals have to answer to whatever we do, as we move through life. So that's none of my business. And, and that's one of the biggest reasons why, I just felt just as serving the community, you pick a side, no matter which side you pick, they both right now, without the conservative mindset, they're both, trying to dictate how people live their normal life. That's not what I'm here for. I don't want to stand for that. What I want to stand for is letting everyone knows, no matter who you are and what you want to do with your life, when you call me, I'm treating you with the utmost respect, dignity, care, and love. As a law enforcement officer first, and as your sheriff.
So right now we have three Republican. There's our current sheriff, Tim Wright. There's Saluta's police chief, Clayton Price, and there's Mike Henderson. And there's no Democrat. But it tells me something about the nature of this community, is that there is no one willing to run as a Democrat, because it's really hard to get elected as a Democrat right now. At least it has been for the last few elections. When you're out trying to convince people to sign your petition, do you enter into these discussions about the nature of partisan influence on law enforcement?
I would get questioned of why, and I just keep it simple, right? Keep it simple where people can understand why. And you just tell them, law enforcement shouldn't be politically influenced. And most people resonate with that as soon as they hear it. Like, you know what, you're absolutely right. No, it shouldn't be a sheriff that's Republican or Democrat. It should be a sheriff of the people. So I like that idea that you're willing to do that. And a lot of people, they are aware that, hey, you got a challenge ahead of you. You got a challenge that's doing that. And for me, I'm not going to say that it's anything against either party for me, because I share some values of both parties, conservative values of both parties. For me, personally, I just feel from, like I said, my experience in law enforcement is you get it done best when people can see that you care. You don't care about what my lifestyle is. You ain't, you don't have conversation about politics and this, that, and the third. You get a lot more done when people know that, hey, this guy is here to do his job and serve and care about this community, regardless what. I've been through houses that had, Democrat signs, and been to houses that had, Republican signs. I've been to houses that had, liberal stuff, and never once did that make me stop at the front door and say, oof, okay, I'm gonna treat this person a little different. No, I don't care about that. That's your personal belief.
Do you think, I mean, are people still, though, are they imposing litmus tests like woke culture litmus tests? They want you to take a stance on LGBTQ issues, or right now we've got the craziness going on in Minnesota, immigration. I mean, do people demand you take a stand on those type of positions?
No, I have not had nobody, demand me to take a stand. I have people ask me, how did I feel? And I would give them my personal feelings on it. Not my law enforcement feelings. I give them my personal feelings, because that's what people want to know. They want to know who you are as a person, how you feel about things as a person. And so I would give them that. And, I have had, nothing but a lot of support once I've talked to folks and they got to hear, you know, just that short 2 to 3 minutes of how I felt personally about things that's going on around us that we all living through right now. And, they give me nothing but support, because they like the idea. They like the idea of, maybe it's time to do something different, because we've been doing it from both sides, and right now it's not working from either side. You get this side in here, it's still chaos, because they altering or battling with the other side. It's never about me and you, never about the people. It's about what this side did the last time, or now what this side did this time. And that's the way our parties on the national level has been moving back and forth. And so I think people as a whole are seeing, maybe we need to try something different. And I feel the same way. And I think it's a lot of other candidates across this, country that feel the same way, because I'm not even the only, I realize that I'm not the only independent that's running for a sheriff office, for the position of the sheriff, in the 26th ballot. It's another guy in Alamance County. And I don't know if he have any law enforcement experience or not, but I'm just glad I don't have to get 5,000 signatures.
Yeah. Well, Polk County's not a bad place to run as an independent, relatively speaking, right? Yeah. But you used the word chaos a couple minutes ago, and so I want to talk a little bit about this moment in time, because you may not want to talk too much about some of the national issues that are gripping this nation, but the one thing I think that is important is the relationship between the people and their law enforcement officials, because what we're seeing, and not just in Minneapolis, but we had ICE officials in Charlotte, they've been in Raleigh, Durham, so they've been relatively close by. I've seen photographs of ICE vehicles in Henderson County. People are not happy with the federal intrusion into law enforcement. And we could spend all day talking about the legal issues on what ICE agents really could do and can't do legally, and it'll be litigated in the courts for years to come.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone would disagree that people are not comfortable with the breakdown in trust between the people and law enforcement in general. And I don't know how many people distinguish between federal, county, state, local law enforcement. They see someone with a badge of some kind, a uniform and a gun, and they're going to react a certain way. What can a sheriff do to help bring us back to a point where people are terrified of their law enforcement officials?
No, that's a really good question. So, that's a tough question for me personally.
But you've chosen to step into this arena at this particular moment in
So
American history.
it's a tough question for me personally, because I'm very passionate about what I do, and sometimes I can say some things to get people riled up, and I don't want to do that, right? I want to speak from a level head. First off, I say this: to build the trust, you got to be careful of who you put in position of your local. That's how you build the trust. Know that person, know who they are, know what they can do for you, know what they have done for others.
Because that's the one relationship, the local police, the one relationship which can be one-on-one,
Yes,
personal. You
that
can
can be
first name
one-on-one.
basis,
Right.
as you were saying.
You should be able to call that person and say, hey, I'm worried about this. He's taking the time to have that conversation with you. And if they see that that is a big need, as you know, at a whole, well, then you set a meeting where you bring the community to a certain place and you initiate that meeting on your own to be able to, hey, I need to do this to make my community feel safe. I need to do this to bring what we're going to do to put in place. That's how you build a community trust. You know, that's what I did at the CRO. I would call you and say, hey, Jane, you left a message and I see you got some problems in your community. Tell me what's going on. Well, I got this going on, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Other community people feel like, yeah, we got a few complaints, you know, me and my neighbors. Stand by, I'm gonna put a meeting on that way I can bring everybody together and get a really good grasp of what's going on. So when I come out and I speak to you and I speak to everybody else in that community, I go back to the office and I get with I would personally get with the admin and we'll come up with a solution to how to make this problem, you know, ease or make it better. In this situation with the federal stuff, it'll be one of those things where you have to try to ease it because I can't control it at the local level. Only thing I could try to do is work with whoever is over it and say, hey, listen, I don't care how you do things other places, but in my county, we're going to operate on a totally different playing field. We're going to treat people like they need to be treated. If you need an operation in my county, you need to come sit down with me first and let me look over your operation, just like we would do with any other agency, whether it was a mutual aid from another law enforcement agency that's local or whatever. That's what you do. You come sit down and have a meeting, which you're supposed to have a meeting with that local, especially that sheriff office. And you let them know, hey, this is what we're doing in your county. This is what we need. And so that way, then you can let the people know, say, hey, this is what they're doing. This is the operation. This is how and you can give people the breakdown on how they're going to be operating it. But right now, we're not getting that. And I'm really disappointed with a lot of our law enforcement leadership that is not speaking out about the way things is.
I mean, locally?
Locally, yeah. I mean, think about it. And I watch the news just like you watch. You heard any, you know, other than, you know, where taking place at like Philadelphia or whatever, but you heard any other, you know, law enforcement agencies speak out and say, hey, listen, this is not right. You know, I understand what ICE is for. I respect ICE. We have to have Border Patrol and Customs. What I disagree with is the tactics. That's inhumane. The tactics, it's not right.
If you were sheriff, if you win this election, assuming you get on the ballot, and if you win, if a Polk County citizen calls you up and says, I got ICE agents in my front yard. I need you to come and serve me, protect me. What do you do knowing that federal law enforcement doesn't really have to answer to you?
Well, for me, I'm going. Me and my admin, we will go. And I had this conversation about a week ago with some guys that I plan on bringing to my admin. We're going. We're going to go and see first, why didn't you contact us? This is my county. These are my people. If you had people here that met your criteria, I might have would have been like, hey, I can call them here. We don't need all this chaos. But that's not the way things are being done. No, it's a bully tactic. It's a bully tactic, and we get that. So for me, you have to stand up for your people. you're not going to come in and just force your way into somebody's house, whether or not that you got the green light for that. To my knowledge, I think we're all under the same constitution. Where that disconnect at, I have no idea. But no, I'm going. I'm going. Personally, I'm going, because that's where I draw the line. You have to treat people like human. You have to.
Well, this is certainly the question I would have for all the candidates for this job is what would you do if you were put in that position of deferring to federal agents or protecting your constituents?
Well, we're gonna protect them. We're gonna protect ours. That's one of the things that I can promise you, that we're gonna protect ours, and we hope to be able to intercept before it gets to that point, because I believe myself and my admin that I would put in place will. I'll be the youngest one, but they've been in the game long enough, and some of these guys been on the federal side for the military, admin levels in the military and admin levels in local law enforcement, to where they've been around long enough to know how to respectfully get their point across, to where we can work all together and get the same mission done without the chaos. It would be, my goal would be to get it to go back to when the Obama administration was in office. They did the same thing. That's why I said, I understand what ICE do, and I respect ICE. I'm not trying to badmouth another agency.
You're not calling for the dismantling of ICE.
Yeah, I don't like the administration that's in charge now and the tactics that they are allowing their guys to use. That's why I have the problem.
And as an independent candidate, you're not in a position of having to choose between party loyalty and your criticism of the administration.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned from one of the chiefs I work with is what we forget as people in this country is the minute somebody step on this American soil, it don't matter how they get here, they fall under the same constitution me and you fall on. That's just how it works. You can't just go snatch them out the car and throw them on the ground. You just can't jump out in traffic, and it's chaos, man. It's chaos, and I believe that they know it's chaos, and that's why they're doing it, because it's chaos.
Well, there certainly is a line of thinking that what's happening with ICE enforcement tactics is a deliberate attempt to sow chaos and provoke overreactions.
Yeah.
To allow even greater oppressive tactics. I honestly never expected to be having a conversation like this in this country with a prospective sheriff.
Absolutely. I personally feel like we're moving backwards in time from the way things are happening with our government, with just, not just in our government, just how some of our community members feel that certain things is okay and allowed. I just feel like we're moving backwards in time instead of moving forward. It's like, listen, like I said, I go back to saying we all understand, what's Border Patrol, Customs, and ICE. We understand the job. Every country has that. We know that me and you can't just go to, Australia and just say, hey, I'm here to stay. No, it's a process, right? We get that. But we also got to understand, what was America built on? It was built on the land of the free. People come here for freedom. People come here to make a different life. They come here to better themselves. This country is built on the back of illegal immigrants coming here and building something for themselves to enrich this country. Where did we lose that? Right.
Well,
that's what I'm asking. Like, where did we lose that?
That's certainly one of the biggest questions. At what point did we forget that immigration is what created America?
That's what people come here for. They could run to Australia, they could run to any other country, but those countries hadn't broadcast that thing of coming here, this is the country, you come here and you build something for yourself. This is where you get the opportunities. You leave whatever situation you're dealing with and you can come here and you can change all that. That's the persona this we have built for decades. And then all of a sudden now it's a problem.
Okay, last question for you is, if we weren't facing these kind of questions at this particular moment, if running for sheriff basically just meant demonstrating your superior administrative skills as a law enforcement official, which is what it used to be.
Yes.
That's all it was.
Yep.
Sheriff is just a better administrator, a better implementer of legal infrastructure.
Yeah.
If that was the case, if that's all Polk County was expected to think about, would you still be running?
Probably not. Probably not.
All right. Well, I think that says an awful lot.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay.
Yeah, because then I think what you're getting would be what people would be expecting. Right? If we were still operating on those principles, it wouldn't be no need that you have two other candidates run against him in his political party primary. But that's not what people are expecting. Law enforcement has been like moving away from that to what, like I said, my experience, I can only speak on my experience. We either call it community-oriented policing or 21st century policing. Law enforcement has been moving towards that style of law enforcement for a long time now. People want more from their law enforcement, and they want more, and they're going to keep asking for more. And that's just the nature of human beings. They want more. They want to be more connected. They want to feel that they have a better, inside view of what's going on in their local law enforcement. They can care less what goes on the state level. They can care less what goes on the federal level. But what they do want to know is, do I have a direct connection with my local? Are you going to let me know certain things that happen inside your organization? If not, why not? That's how we got to the whole body cam thing. You got to think about it. That's the transition to the body cam. The public want to be able to see, are we, holding our officers accountable?
Because people do not trust.
Because they don't trust. We I say we, because I'm part of law enforcement. We have kind of, let our people, down over time from, some stupidity thing that have happened inside of law enforcement. That's part of the reason why I got in, is just to make that different, because I didn't trust law enforcement. And so I think a lot of it is brought on ourselves. As we can see right now, again, we got with the federal stuff going on with the federal agencies. That's another, big distrust that's being formed in the eyes of the community now. Because, it do say police on the back of their vest, if I'm not mistaken. It say ICE police. Last time I checked, ICE wasn't the police.
That is very true. So if people like what they're hearing here, how do they get a chance to help you get on the ballot?
So right now we are, with the weather, the inclement weather has kind of put a really big, another hurdle into getting our petition. So we haven't been able to get out as much. We had to cancel, a handful of events that we had planned to where people could come out and, meet me and sign the petition. So currently what we're doing right now, we have packaged up roughly 600 petition signatures sheets. And we have, with the help of the volunteers, we have selected, because we have we roughly 30 days to the deadline. So we had to, kind of carefully select certain individuals and addresses to send anything to that we could get our best response from, to where they can sign it, send it back for free, or call me from, I got the information on the front side of the petition where it got my number, my email, my social media stuff. They can either call me or they can send my campaign page or a message, and one of the ladies will let me know that I need to call this person, and I go out and pick it up personally. I'm not going to ask nobody to do that. That's something I want to take on my own, so that way that person that is willing to give me that petition see that I'm also willing to add extra duties to myself on top of me, running a business, having a family, to make time to come out, shake your hand, pick up that petition, and say thank you. So that's where we at right now, because the time is, we still have time, but I told the volunteers, like, hey, time ain't on our side no more. This is basically the last month. I don't want to turn in 500 signatures. I think that's what we need, roughly 500, 490 something. I don't want to turn that many signatures in on March the 3rd, because we got to count for about 10% not making it.
Right.
We turn them in on March the 3rd, that's too late. And so, that's why I was like, hey, let's just pull the plug and go to plan B, and let's send these things out. Now we're gonna still, try to put some pop-ups where we, put a tent and a table up at some grocery stores, some gas stations through the county, during this process. But I'm hoping that majority of my votes will come through this mail out thing that I kind of been, I was actually given this from Laura Baker. She told me to try this tactic.
Laura Baker ran for a judgeship
Yes,
in the
she
last
did.
election.
Yes,
she
she
didn't
did.
make it.
Yeah. No, she did not make it. No. But I think she made it on the ballot.
Yes.
Made it on the ballot. And so I know this is one of the tactics that she told me she used that was very, very, very successful. So it costs a lot of money, I'll tell you that. And I'm paying for it out of my own pocket.
Well, it's nice to know you're not beholden to anybody. All right, look, let's wrap it up. I'll just make sure I put something in the show notes, maybe to your Facebook page.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Nesbitt for sure, Facebook and Instagram.
Well, look, thanks so much for finding the time. I know you got not a lot of time and a lot to do. So thanks again, and good luck.
No, thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Look for the link in the show notes to help you find out more about the Nesbitt campaign to get on the ballot. Again, I'm not saying that Republicans shouldn't at least consider voting for any of the candidates seeking their party's nomination for sheriff, but there is no reason you can't do both. And in case you're wondering, I've invited all 3 Republican candidates in the primary to sit for an episode of Folklore, but so far none have agreed to take me up on the offer. The primary is on March 3rd, which is also the deadline for independents to file a petition for inclusion on the November ballot. If you're not registered to vote and you're listening to this episode before Friday, February 6th, you might still have time to correct that oversight. Early voting for the primary begins February 12th at the Polk Elections Office in Columbus. If you've got any suggestions or feedback for me, please shoot an email to jamesh@folklore.com. Thanks for listening.